You know, time and time again on this channel, I point out the fact that progressives, when they're confronted with the policies that they advocate for, all of a sudden find some nuance from Mr. Nuance Bro. They summon him in order to say, well, you know what? This issue wasn't as black and white as I thought, and they begin to slowly back away from their own policy preferences because they realize that they're untenable and they make them incredibly unpopular. However, that cannot be said for Brandon Johnson. Brandon Johnson came into office on the heels of the ousting of progressive Lori Lightfoot. He said he was going to double down on defunding the police and all of the crazy things we've seen from the left wing. And even though his policies have led to increases in crime, more and more store closures, all kinds of problems throughout the city, and the migrant crisis is exacerbating all of those issues, he's doubled down despite the fact that black residents of Chicago are now filing a lawsuit against him for prioritizing the non-citizens, the people who came to this country illegally, over themselves. It's absolutely amazing. Brandon Johnson is not backing down, and we're going to talk about it. But before we do, thank you to everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
Tonight, officials warning Chicago is approaching a breaking point. Tents full of desperate migrants lining Chicago's iconic Lakeshore Drive. Migrant shelters inside O'Hare Airport. A total of 17,000 migrants showing up since last August, and officials expect 1,200 per day to keep coming.
So that's a little bit of a taste of what they're dealing with. They're sheltering people in tents on the side of the road. They're sheltering people inside O'Hare Airport, which, by the way, is actually particularly cruel because on this channel, we actually covered how they were having homeless people living in O'Hare Airport, and this became so much of a security threat and so much of an issue, they actually had to clear these people out during the Lightfoot administration. However, that's perfectly fine, acceptable. The rules don't apply when you come to the United States illegally, apparently. And as you can see, it's objectively a disaster for the city of Chicago. They only have limited resources. However, their sanctuary city status, combined with the fact that they're being forced to live up to that sanctuary city status, is clearly and obviously straining the resources of their city. Now, I say, as somebody who was concerned about the border despite not living in a border state, good. The city of Chicago deserves this. They wanted to sign into law an extra powerful sanctuary city bill in order to own the evil orange man, even though they were already a sanctuary city. They said they wanted the migrants. Well, they can take them. They can deal with all the consequences of this, and they could be shown to be the hypocrites that they actually are, because again, homeless people in Chicago can't camp at the airport, but migrants can.
Democratic Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker slamming President Biden for not doing enough, writing, "The federal government's lack of intervention and coordination at the border has created an untenable situation for Illinois."
Now, in this story, I'm going to talk about Brandon Johnson's obstinance. I'm going to talk about the fact that he's sticking by the welcome everybody in, we'll spend all the money that we possibly can on welfare for these illegal immigrants, and if Chicagoans wanted any public services, what they should do is fly down to Mexico from O'Hare Airport and then enter the country illegally, and then maybe they'll be treated with some respect. I have to point out that this has caused a lot of infighting within the Democratic Party between Democratic governors because they have to pay for it. They're feeling the political heat for it, and the Biden administration. And one of the reasons why, you know for a fact, that this is really ticking them off is just listen to what the Biden administration's response is to these Democratic governors.
The White House blaming Congress for not acting and saying they've accelerated work permits and provided $1 billion to cities nationwide.
Now, just to give you an idea of how absurd the Biden administration's stance is right here, when he's talking about $1 billion, you need to put that in context because he's saying we spent $1 billion on all cities in the United States of America total that are dealing with the migrant crisis. However, just New York City is estimated to have spent about $5 billion on the migrants, and this is largely due to the fact that they have other ridiculous policies in New York City that are similar to Chicago. However, one that's pretty unique is the right to shelter, which of course applies to illegal immigrants. And by the way, in the city in Chicago in specific, they don't ask for citizenship status whenever they're giving out government benefits. So that's another reason why migrants are being drawn there.
I don't want them there.
But protests here are growing.
To have the government come in and dump 300 people right next door to me, it is not fair.
Now, as you can see by the residents of Chicago, this has led to a lot of anger. This has led to them being very upset. This has led to the citizens of not only this country, but of the city of Chicago, feeling like they are being deprioritized, their homeless are being deprioritized, in order to cover economic migrants that are illegally manipulating the asylum system in order to receive public benefits and stay in the country longer in the hopes that they will be legalized somewhere down the line because they will have been here so long.
My administration is committed to making sure that we are putting together the full force of government at every single level to ensure that these families, who, by the way, they're not illegal, they're asylum seekers.
But like I said in the open, nobody could stop Brandon Johnson, who will not yield 1 inch on this issue and has declared that these obvious instances of asylum abuse that are happening at the border of the United States due to policies of the Biden administration that are acting as magnets, due to policies in places like San Francisco, like New York City, like Chicago that are acting as magnets, are not the issue at hand. In fact, all these people are legal, they're all legitimate asylum seekers, and it is good for the city of Chicago to prioritize those people over those residents. And the thing is, normally this would go off without a hitch, but the problem is a lot of these people are being moved in to the very same areas that ultimately ended up voting for Brandon Johnson, which, by the way, that is justice for them. You're getting what you voted for, but the residents are not too happy with it, so they're deciding that they're going to sue the Johnson administration for prioritizing the migrants over themselves, and I think that this is a hilarious and amazing result.
He should be taking himself to helping the community here and making sure that he is handling the crisis that's here.
So first of all, I want to say I do appreciate her energy. I appreciate the way she said that. It entertained me beyond all end. But more importantly, on the substance, she's 100% right. The idea that people who are breaking the law by abusing the asylum system, or even legitimate asylum seekers, take priority of our own citizens in our cities, in our states, in our nation as a whole, is an absurdity that has been hoisted on the American population. And by the way, while it is true, these people were perfectly fine when it was hoisted onto the citizens of Texas, Arizona, and other border states, the fact is the point of shipping the migrants there was to change their minds, and now they're realizing the position of the residents of the city of Chicago. I played the clip of Cenk Uygur talking about how this was a good, smart, intelligent policy. I'll play it again for you.
So look, I said this on day one. I'm gonna repeat it even with greater fervor today. I think that what Texas did makes sense. And so I know that a lot of people on the left don't wanna hear that, but think about it, guys. So they had this immigration problem all along, and it wasn't spread out to many different states. It was just in Texas, and of course the other border states. And the federal government kept saying, I don't care, okay? Now, to be fair to the federal government, it doesn't just quite say that. It has a lot of different programs in place. The idea that there's open borders is nonsense. No, there's a border and they enforce it. They return people all the time, etc. But tons of people come in, and the border states said, why? Why do we have to shoulder all of this by ourselves? And started shipping it to other places that were more left wing and said they were more open to immigrants. So you're open to immigrants, here you go, here's immigrants. And now all of a sudden New York realizes, okay, well, being open to immigrants has consequences, right?
And this is because it is a good, smart, intelligent policy. If you have a federal government that is completely ignoring the plight of certain states in this country, then spreading that problem out specifically to where his voter base is, to where his donor base is a brilliant tactic in order to force the change that you want. And it may not have worked with Brandon Johnson, who's still committed to putting illegals above anyone who is born in the United States, is a naturalized citizen, or is in the legal process of immigration in the United States of America. But obviously, based on the governor of Illinois, based on the governor of New York, based on the mayor of New York City, it's having an impact on other Democrats, making this policy prove successful in its original goal and intent, which is to change the conversation and change the impact of open borders policies.
The city is now also facing a lawsuit brought by 2 members of the South Shore Community Group. They held a meeting to talk about the issues they're experiencing with a closed high school turned into a migrant shelter.
The first thing that this lawsuit is about is for South Shore High School to reopen as a high school.
Isn't that amazing? So at first I thought that South Shore High School was closed well before this or something like that, but it appears, and maybe I'm reading these reports wrong, that the high school was specifically closed in order to make sure that they had a shelter for the migrants. Now, I will say, Chicago's education, not very good. Their education in this part of Chicago, not very good. But for you to just throw in the towel and give up on this specific high school in order to cater to the migrants is completely absurd and insane. And considering Brendan Johnson is largely fueled by the teachers' unions, that's where he used to work before he was the mayor of Chicago, it seems like an asinine proposition, yet he's getting away with it. Also, I will take note of the fact that they clearly and obviously got a mob boss Italian lawyer in order to represent them. Obviously, I'm going to point that out. But also, somebody else has joined the fight.
We're calling on the mayor and the governor to freeze the language of Sanctuary City.
They actually found Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself to demand that they freeze the language of sanctuary cities in the law in the city of Chicago so that they can actually reject some of these people from this city, because he understands our very important legacy civil rights hero himself that this does not make sense. He's not going to say that camping in the United States of America illegally and taking over high schools is the language of the unheard, because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who survived his assassination attempt, is not about that life. He's not about them immigrants, and it is what it is.
This group is also calling for an audit to take a look deeper into how the city is spending the money allocated to help the migrants.
So this is actually one of the most important things that they included in their lawsuit, and while I don't think they're going to be able to get any money because they have the sanctuary city law, there's federal law related to people who are claiming to be asylum seekers, but the fact of the matter is, the reason they're diverting money that would often get wasted on education, because there's a ton of bloat in the education system, a ton of corruption, to the migrant issue, is because in reality, a lot of people can make a lot more money off of this, and it's less traceable. So the fact that they're seeking an audit of what the Brendan Johnson administration is doing with these funds, absolutely crucial. We've seen Democrats essentially steal money straight up from the taxpayer, a la Thrive New York in the city of New York, where Bill de Blasio's wife misplaced $800 million. Yes, that's a true story. There were no receipts, but it's okay because she said she was trying to help the mentally ill. Therefore, she's not accountable for her funding. And I'm guessing the migrant programs are likely the same thing. I'm guessing you're going to find out that a lot of people who supported Brendan Johnson are getting the money in order to run these shelters, and very little of it is going to the migrants themselves. So we're not even in a situation where 100% we're certain that the migrants are being prioritized over the everyday citizens. We might be in a more cynical situation where Brendan Johnson has figured out it's actually easier to loot the treasury of the city of Chicago if he directs that money into migrant programs rather than the other things that they steal from, like education or anything else that the government does in the city of Chicago. Now look, in this particular instance, it's kind of inarguable that the residents of Chicago did vote for this. However, I understand that they didn't realize the consequences of their vote, and the fact that they're suing, they're protesting, they're raging out once faced with those consequences, I think, I hope, I believe will help us move forward in actually changing the policy. So we can laugh at them, sure, that's fine, everybody likes to have fun, but now that they seem to be moving towards our position, this is something that we should talk about. And yes, it was always immoral for border towns in this country to have to deal with the influx of migrants and the federal government to just ignore them. But now that the pain is spread, let's hope that the solution can be reached. But overall, that's really all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the migrant crisis in Chicago. Till next time.